Today we celebrate St. John of the Ladder. He was a great monastic leader. He was the abbot of St. Catherine's in Mount Sinai. And the book that he wrote, which is The Ladder of Divine Ascent, which is where he gets this title or this name, John of the Ladder. In which he shows a ladder to attaining spiritual perfection, a ladder into the kingdom of heaven. We'll talk a little bit about him later. But the first gospel that we read, where this man brings to Jesus his son, the apostles couldn't do anything, and this guy had. The son had it says, a mute spirit, one which would cast him into the fire, into the water, which was trying to destroy him. And so the man asked the Lord, if you can do anything, please help me. And Jesus says, if you believe, anything is possible for those who believe. Anything is possible for those who believe. And the man replies, Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. Now, I don't know about you all, but I'm there sometimes. Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. And that belief, what is belief? Belief is our rational understanding, right? It's how we believe this is true. We'll confess it. This is. I understand this, and I accept it. Faith is something on a different level, and I think what the Lord is referring to here is that distinction between faith and belief. Because belief is in our head, but faith is in our heart. Faith is that living experience, that awareness of God, that knowledge of God, which transcends all rational thought. Because ultimately, this man's son had been possessed by this demon for years. And he'd taken him to healers. He'd done everything he could to try and get his son healed, and nothing happened. So of course his rational mind was saying, well, okay, so I'll try this one now. And maybe he can help, maybe he can't, probably not. Anything is possible for those who believe, the Lord said. And so in reply to that man's authentic confession, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. In other words, there was no hypocrisy here. He healed his son. How often is it that we ask God for things and don't believe that he is going to give them to us? We ask and we don't receive because we don't believe that God is going to give them to us. Now, maybe he's saying no to what we ask. But if we believe that he will give us whatever we need, and accept that as not simply with our rational mind, but with our heart. And another aspect of this is bringing our mind and our heart together. Not letting the doubts and not letting all of the ideas and temptations and the things that afflict us in our rational mind distract us from that living experience of faith in God. That faith that God will give us whatever we need for our salvation. Because I think most of us, most of the time, are at this place, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. Or, Lord, I want to believe, help my unbelief. But if we believe, if we truly have faith, and this faith is that living experience of God, that living awareness of God, which we need to cultivate in our souls, which indeed is, as it says in the epistle, is the very foundation of our life, the foundation of our very being. Because what that knowledge of God is, what that awareness of God is it's our awareness of the grace of God, which is not only the foundation of our life in this world, it's the very foundation of our being. And when it comes down to it, in the very depths of our being, in the very depths of God is the only place we're going to find our true self. And in the very depths of our being, as we will find God there. Because God is not out there someplace. He's in our minds, He's in our hearts, He's in our souls. A large part of the spiritual life of the Orthodox Church, of the discipline, is cultivating that awareness of God, cultivating that faith which is the living knowledge of God. So the apostles came back to him after he cast out the demon and healed the boy. And they said, Lord, why couldn't we cast him out? And Jesus said to them, it's because these kind only come out by prayer and fasting. Now we know from other places in the gospel that the prayer and fasting were not, or the fasting anyway, was not the strong point of the apostles. In fact, the disciples of John, if you remember elsewhere in the gospel, were complaining that Jesus' disciples weren't fasting according to the rules. And Jesus said, well, when the bridegroom is there, how can you fast? There'll be time for fasting later. Well, the time for fasting is now. We're in the middle of Lent. And what does that fasting mean? It doesn't mean just abstaining from certain foods and getting all of these new high-tech substitutes, that the pea protein that tastes like burgers, and the fake this and the fake that, and we have fake milk and we have fake, Pharisee food, right? What a concept it would be to actually just eat real food, natural food as it is, instead of all these chemicals, huh? That would be quite a Lenten fast. But that's not fasting. That's abstention. Maybe abstaining from meat and dairy and animal products. But fasting means that you don't eat. It means that you, on the ancient discipline of the church is that you don't eat anything until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, until the 9th hour. That's fasting. Combine that with abstinence, and you've got a pretty severe discipline. A lot of people can't do that, especially living and working in the world. But then, unless we're praying like that and fasting like that, how are we going to cast out those demons? The fasting is not just from food. The fasting from food is there to remind us that what we need to be doing is fasting from sin, fasting from all of those, from all the various kinds of self-gratifying pleasures and indulgences, whether it's some kind of carnal indulgence in food or in sensuality, whether it's some kind of self-justified, the kind of self-satisfaction you get when you tell somebody off. We need to stop that. We need to fast from that. And in fact, actually, that kind of thing is something we need to exorcise. We need to cast out that demon from our life. And we can only make fasting really effective. And I'm not talking about as a diet. We can only make fasting truly effective when we're entering into prayer. And I'm not talking about prayer to God as Santa Claus, where all of our prayer is about give me, give me, give me, give me. And especially when we don't really believe that God's going to do it. But that the real prayer, the core, is that expression of our love of God, manifest through how we also treat our neighbor. Because our prayer has to manifest itself in our works. That expression of our love of God, whether it's in words or whether it's in silence. Whether our prayer is from a prayer book, whether it's on a prayer rope, or whether it's stillness, or whether our prayer is serving the poor and those in need. That's prayer. And that can only happen through fasting, by cutting out all of the distractions of our life. Then equipped by prayer and fasting, serious prayer and serious fasting, we'll be able to overcome the demons in our own lives. We'll be able to overcome the habits and the passions, and the passion is a habit that's out of control. So that they'll no longer throw us into the water and into the fire and try and destroy us. But we will gain mastery over them as we gain mastery over ourselves. And here's where this gospel completely coincides with the feast of St. John of the Ladder. Because the discipline of the spiritual life is what the ladder of divine ascent is all about. How we ascend to God, to the knowledge of God, through prayer and fasting, through denying ourselves, cutting off the anger, cutting off the envy, cutting off the vainglory and pride, cutting off the gluttony and the lust, cutting off the avarice, saying no to ourselves, denying ourselves. Remember the gospel last week, you must deny yourself. We must deny ourselves and take up our cross and follow Christ. This is what St. John of the Ladder wrote about, and why he is and why his book, The Ladder of Divine Ascent, is read in monasteries all the way through, hopefully, every Lent, aloud. So, to remind us that this is our path. And so we have the gospel today, the second gospel of the Beatitudes. We heard it twice. Once we sang it, and once we read it. And what is the culmination of that ladder? Blessed are you when men revile you and persecute you, and say all manner of evil against you falsely, for my name's sake. If we fast and pray, if we truly embrace the Christian life, we will be not of this world. In fact, we have to renounce the world. And that goes not only for monks, but for every Christian. And the world doesn't like that, and will fight against it. And what a fitting conclusion to that first gospel in light of the second. And the Lord told his disciples that he would be tortured and he would be murdered as they went up to Jerusalem. This is the first announcement of his passion. So let us think about, what does it mean to truly believe? Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. What does it mean to pray and fast? And what does it mean to truly follow Christ, even as we also are called to accept even that cross? That he had.